theme: every 10 minutes a woman is killed. No excuse. Unite to end violence against women. So we're going to have a panel of women that are going to be talking about this show. We have Professor Mokami Makram. She is the chair of QUISA, and she'll be telling us about that. We also have Dr. Isioma Okolo, who is also NHS gynecologist specialist, and she's also be joining online and to discuss on this very special subject. We also have Laura. I forgot the other name. Anyway, we have Laura from the Migrant Voices, publication, which talks about writes a lot about gender-based violence. We find out more details on that. So my job here is just to introduce them, by the way. So before the guests come on, this announcement. For those of you that are interested in improving health and shaping the future of medicine in your community, there is a clinical trial which you could be involved in, and that could be a next step of finding a solution to perhaps long-term medical condition. At Synoxis Research Scotland, they are working to help advance medical research, and you can be part of it. Right now, they are looking at new treatment options for high blood pressure, chronic kidney diseases, and asthma. Interestingly, for you and the community, Synoxis are recruited for trials that are researching conditions, especially in people of African and Caribbean ancestry and heritage. This is due to the genetic mutation that occurred on the African continent thousands of years ago and could still be affecting your family and community today. This gene can be passed down through generations without any of the carriers being aware, and unfortunately it leads to an increased chance in kidney disease. It is important to note up to 9 in 10 of people with kidney disease do not realize they have it for a prolonged period of time. So even if you don't think this is for you, but you want to be or to want to potentially help to improve health outcomes for your community, your family, you should get in touch with Synexus. Join a clinical trial that is assessing new treatments and providing expert care, and with the possibility of reimbursement for your time. Your safety is always their priority. Our priority, and participation is voluntary. If you want to take part in that, to see if you're eligible, call the number 0141 945 6850. That is 0141 945 6850, and quote the words radio if you want to take part in that. So hopefully our guests are joining us now, and on the line I think we should have Professor Mokami Makram and Dr. Isioma Okolo. If they're there, Samson is our producer this morning. So Samson, if you're not getting the buttons right, I'm gonna be telling the audience who is behind.
Yeah, we're here. If you can hear us.
Do we have the guest on yet?
No, it's not affecting them. It's affecting just
Can you guys hear us?
Okay,
We're here.
so okay.
But can they hear out there?
Yeah, you can hear them.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you see us?
If we have the guests on the line, there's quite a lot.
Nobody knows the problem.
There's quite a lot of noise coming out from the back. There is a microphone in the control room on. There's quite a lot of background noise that's coming in there. Is everything working okay? So what do we have on the line? No, it's gone quiet.
Hello, we're online.
Right.
Just in case.
Apologize
we're
for
here
the
already.
technical mix-up there. No, we seem to be having a a technical issue getting through to the guest online. Maybe we should try. Okay, Dr. Isioma Okolo is. Yes. Okay. Hello, Dr. Isioma Okolo. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, George. Yes.
Okay,
Can
that's
you hear
good.
me?
Yeah, excellent. That's good.
Oh, good.
Yes,
And
yeah.
yes, so I'm here with Professor Mukami Makrum as well. We happen to be in the same room, which is great. Can you see us? Because we can see you.
Okay, good. I can see. Oh, right. I can see. See, I can see your beautiful faces. I mean, listen. Saturday afternoon. Very good afternoon to you, Professor Mokami Makrom and Dr. Isioma Okolo. Thank you for coming. I think we should start off with Professor Mokami Makrom, kind of really introducing what she's the chair of. You're the chair of QUISA. Can you perhaps start by telling us what QUISA is and why is this subject important?
Yeah, good morning, George. Thank you for having us. QUISA is an organization for women of African heritage, which was started more than 10 years ago. And our main focus is looking at ways of uplifting, supporting, and developing African women. We deal with women of African heritage, wherever you are and wherever you come from and however you got to Scotland. We have been focusing literally on women health and looking at particular inequalities which affect our well-being and looking at things like violence against women, female genital mutilation, and recently, and Dr. will speak to you about it, looking at maternity issues, the outcomes that women still continue to face. We work at policy level, but we also do direct work with individuals who may come to us with a particular problem, and by either referring to people we work with, or we have a range of partners, and also by making sure the policies that are made by government and institutions do serve us, not just there and not responding. There's a huge difference between impact on how policies impact on people, and we're looking at this not just for the current group. It's the what kind of legacy are going to leave behind for the people who come after us. I said African women and girls, but we actually look at families as well, because we are members of families, and issues that impact on women also impact on their families and children. So it's quite a broad subject. We do get focus areas of particular focus, but we are willing and happy to look at broader issues, because there's nobody who is just a single issue. Our biggest concern is that service providers compartmentalize their service in a way that it leaves out so many of other issues that make you a whole person. So while we are building capacity as an organization, we do that through building capacity of individual women. And I'm really glad PC is a member of QUISA, is a director of QUISA too.
Yes, no, I think you summarized Pisa so well. There's definitely nothing to add. And I'm obviously I'm a clinician, but I have to be honest, my clinical practice is also informed by my community engagement and work in QUISA as a director. So thank you very much for inviting us and holding space for this very important subject.
No, absolutely. So we've got, the next, say, up to an hour to cover this subject, which is very good. It's 16 days of activism, no excuses, unite to end violence against women. Why is this happening? I mean, many people listening to this will be thinking, is this still an issue in the 21st century? Perhaps, Dr. Isioma Okolo, perhaps you could talk a bit more on this, and then Professor can contribute as well while we wait for Laura Naomi to join us.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a very good question. Why? Why is it still happening? And actually, Professor Mukami is going to also enlighten us with regards to an event that we're planning, focusing on this subject, why. So I guess first of all, anybody listening, I guess a warning about what we're talking about is quite a sensitive nature, and for some people this may be triggering. And at the end of the session, we also hope to provide advice on how to seek help. But essentially, at the core of why we have violence against women is power and power imbalances, which are historical and kind of baked into the way society and politics run. We do also have certain elements of culture, depending where you are in the world, with regards to where women's roles are in society. And you always have power imbalances, but the problem is power imbalances that are unchecked. So there's lack of accountability when it comes to these power imbalances, when it comes to women and violence against women. As many as 1 in 3 women right now across the world have been impacted by some form of gender-based violence. And if you look at the data, every 10 minutes in the world, 1 woman is killed by her partner or her family. And, many of us, especially in this community, that are big customers of Jambo Radio will have the name of Rebecca Chepechai on our lips with regards to what happened recently. But at the core of it, it's power. It's power imbalances that are unchecked against women.
Yeah. So, Professor, maybe you can add as well on that. Why is that still happening? Obviously, Dr. Okolo has mentioned about the power imbalances and all of that is happening. You are very, renowned activist as well in terms of empowerment, gender equality, and after retiring from civil service as a equality executive. Why is that still happening?
Yeah, I think that first of all, if we look at, we say 16 days of activism. Ideally, it should be every day of activism in the year. But I think even more ideally, we shouldn't be doing it because there should be violence against women and girls. And we also know there's violence against men. But when we focus on women, it's simply because of numbers. There are more women who experience violence from partners and families as opposed to the other way around. And also, it's not just about domestic abuse. It's about other violence, sexual harassment in the workplace, in the streets, wherever we are, women feel they are constantly under threat. Now, in terms of why, we are asking this question because we were all horrified. We ask all the time, but I think occasionally headlines come that really kick you in the gut. And Rebecca Cheptegei being murdered by petrol poured over her and lit on fire is a big statement of how that partner and the society view women. And can we really afford in 21st century to keep hiding behind culture, behind arguments like is the way they are? The society is like that. Can we really say we're going to leave this to our grandchildren and great-grandchildren, that they are going to keep facing violence? I grew up in a society where there was violence against women, but to a certain extent, I do recall the grandmother saying it was checked in a certain, that power, where if during my grandmother's time, if a man was beating his wife all the time, or children were being beaten beyond punishment level, the family would take action. The brothers and come and say, you can take your dowry back, we want our daughter back. But there seems to be now it's a free for all. Women have become almost public property. People can do what they want, they can say what they want. And it's a big concern for us in the sense that when I came to this country, I was horrified to find that violence existed. We get, people talk about cultural shock, but you kind of, when during my time I came here, there was a sort of assumption that everything is okay here. And I came across a lot of violence against women, not just people African, but the particular issue for us was when women experience violence from other community, if you have come in, you didn't have the system, you did not have the sisters and the brothers and the aunts and the uncles to support you. You are alone with this individual who beats you every day or every other time. And we needed to create spaces for protection for women like who face violence as well as girls. Women would report about rape, but they would say when they reported to the police was minimized, and it was they were actually asked, why were you out? Women coming from shifts, from working at night because they needed to work, then would be punished because she was attacked, and then it's her fault because she was outside. Other people would say, oh, your culture is like that anyway. It's a sin. We didn't matter when bad things happen to us. And we really had to do something. But my concern is, why are we still doing it? Why do we still have to do that now? In spite of all the work, all the policies, all the laws that exist, why are women still suffering today?
Yeah, and on that question, why are women still suffering today? Do you think that it has to do? There are still some cultural norms. There's some cultural attribute that is also still promoting that aspect of it, because there in some cultures, there will be it's normalized in the sense that it's based on culture and traditions to be perhaps violent against a woman. But if that is the situation, how do we change that? Do any of you think that this is kind of cultural aspect in terms of how society, the fabrics of society are constructed, or is it has to do with a specific culture in society, which in this sense we could be talking about is the black culture different from the Caucasian culture in terms of how we approach a relationship with women, men approach relationship with women?
Yeah. I think that's a very good question. And often when we say culture, for some reason people think culture only applies to black and brown people. We have Scottish culture where we have culture in Glasgow, culture in Edinburgh, Aberdeen, depending on where you are. But I think what unites all these different cultures, black culture, African culture, Asian culture, is in terms of violence against women, is the inequality of women. So society, for some reason, has decided that it is acceptable to say men and women are not equal. So the way we treat women when it comes to violence is acceptable. And, so when we talk about violence against women, often we think about the obvious kinds: domestic abuse, rape, sexual harassment, sexual assault. But what about the online bullying, cyberbullying, examples of doxing? And these are examples, particularly trolling, that impact Black women, women of African heritage, particularly when you look at online behavior. There's also, less obvious examples like the coercion. So, for example, financial coercion and emotional abuse. So violence doesn't just show up as bruises or injuries. There's the mental and emotional burden that women and their families bear, when it comes to this kind of violence. Taking control of a woman's finances or of her immigration status. You've moved to Scotland, recently married, and then perhaps your partner isn't necessarily beating you, but then they are in control of your finances, in control of your visa. You become really vulnerable and isolated in that state. And of course, with Kwisa's organization, one of the forms of violence against women we particularly advocate against is female genital mutilation or cutting. And of course, we talk a lot about against, child marriage, things like that. And, if you look at different parts of the African continent, so many different examples of things like breast ironing, labial elongation. So violence is both visible and invisible. And at the source of it is the accepted norm, no matter the culture, that women and men are not equal. So in Latin America, they have very high rates of feminicides, where particularly girls and women are targeted. In parts of Asia, you have this selective gender terminations, for example, where the girl child is not viewed as valuable, and people intentionally will have an abortion if they know they're having a girl. In parts of Nigeria, where I'm from, the narrative is more around domestic abuse, particularly intimate partner violence. But here in Scotland, we're here a lot of that, but also cyberbullying, doxing, and even taking it a bit wider. We have violence against women when it comes to maternity care. We talk a lot about the disparities in maternity care in the UK, where Black women are 4 times more likely to die in pregnancy. Babies are like 50% more likely to be born like preterm, too small, and stillborn. It's like horrifying statistics. And it's not just the outcome. When you look at people's experiences as well, people are having essentially what is a form of obstetric violence against them in that because they are pregnant and because they're women, they are treated differently. And that as well is another manifestation of violence against women. And I guess one thing I want to be clear about when we talk about this, people now think, oh, this is a battle of men versus women. No. Yeah. So what we are battling essentially is the patriarchy. We are essentially battling the patriarchy. And I guess in Scotland, we're also battling white supremacist patriarchal systems. And I must say, patriarchal systems are upheld by everybody, men, women, everybody, every single person. Okay, so what that means, though, it's an opportunity. It means that we all have a role to play in terms of eradicating it, knowing what it is, knowing how common it is. 1 in 3 women. So that means if you're sat on a bus in your office just now, George, the chances that you're sat or actually very close to somebody who has experienced this, and particularly somebody who has survived this. So we talk about the language that is also empowering, because, maybe historically, and I think Professor Mukami can speak more to this, we spoke a lot about victims of violence against women, but now we talk about survivors, because the narrative has to change, and that part of that is reclaiming the power. So survivorship to challenge, what the source of it is as well.
Yes.
On the survival. Yeah, go ahead, Professor.
No, I think on the question of culture, Izzy has explained very well. We know, I think it's agreed, all women or anybody who experiences violence feels pain the same way. There isn't a difference because you're from different culture or you look different color. It's the same. The difference comes in the opportunities available for you to escape, or for it to stop for you. And we find, depending on again, assumptions like racism, patriarchal system, how people see us, your chances of getting support or escaping violence are much more difficult. And that is where we come in. It's not we're trying to say we're unique or something. We are the same with other women in the world, and we're looking at particular inequalities that make it harder for us to deal with. For example, if I'm alone going through maternity and I don't have any support from anybody else, what do I do when I face discrimination? Or we hear horrible stories, and the stories sometimes are not even as bad as the experience people go through. And really, we are calling on all people, because it's not just women. We are mothers, we are sisters, we are wives of men and boys. Boys are our children, our grandchildren. So it's not about having African women of African descent have never wanted to be separatism. It's not about that, but it's about well-being and welfare and human rights of all of us. Because we don't look at it as I know that it is commonly said, if you educate a woman, you educate the whole family. Yes, but actually, if you protect a woman, you protect the whole family. And that is a message we want to give people. And we want to work, especially, we really are encouraged when young people say, for example, men say they don't want women cut in their name. Because we women also uphold patriarchal systems by feeding into them. But when young men say form campaign and they fight against female genital mutilation, and they say, please don't do it in our name, it's really encouraging. And we want more men to stand with us, to say, yeah, you know, you are our mothers, you are sisters, you are grandmothers, you are our wives. Let's stop this together.
What do you say to people thinking, okay, you know, there's a lot of women empowerment that's going on, and you know, it's all about the society is always accused of, you know, men. It's constructed in a way that men are always in control, but they have the Women Day, we have all different campaigns that are supportive, empowering women. What do you say to people who have that sort of thought about that? Because the reason I'm asking that question is you know, gender-based violence, as serious as it is, and it's something that I would not advocate for, you know, and of course I'm completely advocating against in my line of work, and I'm also really supportive of this campaign. But I'm thinking there will be people out there, like there's quite a lot of women empowerment. There are also women who think that it is best for a man to be in control, which is something that you've alluded there in part of what you've been saying so far. What would be your response to someone thinking that way?
Yeah,
I see Dr. Silva looked at Professor there because you don't feel like you have much experience to talk about this. No, that's fine. No, that's right.
I have experience. We have to let our elders go first.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
Look at that. There's power in age. No, okay. I think that we never actually assume that people are the same, or men and women are the same. This is why we talk about equity, not about equality, in the sense that we're looking at balance of actually, is that people being best at what they are at. And actually people also recognizing if in a household, the damaging effects of violence, and why it's not a good idea to do. But when people say the girl child or the boy child, I think there's a misunderstanding of what women are asking for when we ask for violence to end or for equality, because we're not saying, it's not a zero-sum equation where you take some from men. It's actually looking at the people at the bottom. If there's a house on fire, you don't pour water on the one which is likely to catch fire next week. You pour water on the one which is burning today. So it's looking at the people who are at the bottom and uplifting and stopping violence, or providing resources which enable women to have education. For example, we tell fathers, your child, if you educate a girl and she becomes a doctor, she'll bring in more money than the cows you think you sell her for, you know, because if it's about marriage. So it's looking at the best option for all people within a family or community or society. It's not about competing one with the other. And we also recognize, and we cannot blame women for the boy child not getting the right education. In diaspora in particular, we miss the opportunities young men used to get from older uncles and grandfathers to learn about being responsible men. And I think part of the reason we're seeing the level of violence, which is so brutal now, it's actually because terms of engagement have changed. The social relationships people have changed. Now it's about power, it's about control. It's not about relationship. I said in the beginning, during my grandmother's time, the family would be involved if a woman was supposed to be misbehaving, or if a man was being cruel and beating wife and children because of that. But later on, it's a free for all. And this is what we want to now start going back to look at. How do we bring a good, healthy relationship between men and women, between young men and young women as they grow up, rather than this notion of competition? Because I think that's where there's a misunderstanding. We are not wanting women to control and to become rulers. We want women to become doctors, pilots, scientists, just like men, because they're capable of doing that. And in fact, it benefits the whole society when that happens. We use the talents which are there. But if that means that then the boys don't become scientists, well, maybe they weren't good at it. Maybe they would do something they are good at, rather than this assumption these are only things for men and these are only things for women, and for people to do them, then we are breaking the culture, because there's nobody's culture which was written down like that anywhere. We had the faith leaders in Scotland signing a declaration to say that FGM is not a requirement of on any faith. And scholars looked at their books, and there's nowhere it says in the Bible, go and beat your wife.
Yeah.
So it's not, when we construct a sort of a social norm, we have to disconstruct it to make sure that, and in doing so, we build better and new relationships.
I agree with what you said, Professor.
Yeah,
The relationships,
absolutely.
because
So before Dr. Okolo, before you come, saying sorry, can I we'll just bring on Laura Naomi with the Migrant Voice project. Laura, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Okay, good afternoon to you and welcome to the show. How are you this afternoon?
I'm doing well. I'm really happy to join you three in this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're more than welcome. Listen, we've started off the conversation and it's all about the 16 days of activism on gender-based violence and, of course, violence against women, and to stop all the excuses, and let's crack on with the discussion. Why do you think this is still happening? You that work with publication, you're a journalist, I have to say. Why do you think this is still happening?
So I wouldn't have an exact answer why it's still happening, but what we are doing at Migrant Women Press is publishing women's original reportings and opinion pieces so that we can talk about such a rampant topic, gender-based violence. And by focusing on these diverse voices, we are able to provide an intersectional perspective on migration discussions, and we also confront a lot of misrepresentation amongst the migrant communities, because when you think about gender-based violence still happening in a place like the United Kingdom, for someone coming into the UK, they wouldn't think these things are happening, but they're not only happening because men are violent towards women. They are caused by lots of systematic there's something that needs to be done more than just having conversations, and it's letting women tell their stories and report. And I also know that amongst migrant people, they do not know most of them do not know what services are available. So we focus on all those things when we tell our stories.
Yeah, okay. And so it's basically the Migrant Voice project, publication is basically to give the voice. Is it to survivor or victims?
So we give women spaces to write. So this could be journalists who are already practicing, or any migrant woman from any part of the world who wants to tell their story. So we are providing a platform, and not only just a platform. Like for this campaign, we partnered with a few organizations, and some of the organizations were able to support us financially, and others were able to support us by holding workshops to share skills with these women who are new in reporting, so that they can be trauma informed. I was listening in on the conversation, and people were talking about the language that you use when you're talking about these issues like migration and violence. And when you start thinking about the languages and how to interview a woman while you're writing about them, or even the language you use when you're talking about your story. So it's all part of giving a voice and being able to create change together.
Yeah. Yeah, and in terms of creating change, I kind of mentioned about the. I think it'll be important to kind of have the rest of the panel in. We've talked about kind of the power dynamics that exist with society, and also looking at what are the inequalities that society is constructed, which is which is also an issue with how women are being looked at in society. Do you think there's also a danger of perhaps the fact that there is a lot of campaign globally on different issues that are only related to women? Do you think there's a danger of also alienating men's perspective? I'm talking as a man, but I'm trying to balance up the conversation here. And you, as a journalist, I'm sure you can also touch on that. Do you think there's a danger of alienating men in these conversations? But I'm proud to be here. I'm privileged to be here, actually. So I'm privileged to be in this conversation. And I have to say that, listen, behind the scene, there are a lot of women in the studio today, which is coincidentally happening with this conversation going on. There are more women in this studio than men, so which is quite interesting. But Laura, do you think there's danger of keeping men out of this conversation?
You cannot keep men out of this conversation. It is important that as much as we empower women, men are also empowered. And when we write these stories, we don't only aim for women to access them. We are hoping that these stories can be shared with their families, and that the same amount of attention given to girls and women is given to boys, because we are not saying that only women face violence, but it's that the number of cases reported, and it's mostly women who are affected by violence, and the perpetrators are men. So it's important to find ways to see what's really happening when men are growing up, and what is really affecting, so that we can challenge all these causes.
Yeah, absolutely. Perhaps, Professor Macron, I think it would be good to bring you in again. Well, given the fact that you, perhaps I've seen more stories and and heard more and seen more things than most of us on this panel. Perhaps you could share with us, like, how should we be bringing up men in this generation? What should we be saying to the young boys and of course the girls as well? In terms of, you alluded earlier about there is no relationship this time. It's all about power. Is that power based on the fact that there's more, perhaps has to do with the ways the economics of society has been constructed, that it's all about capital, who has money has power?
Yeah, well, first of all, Kwisa had, and we're hoping to revive a men's group, men and boys group. And the idea behind that was they would look at particular issues that impact on their lives in Scotland. And from that, we would have dialogue between two groups and looking at the future. How do we work together? Because it's usually about lack of information, lack of alternatives. People sometimes, for example, people now watch TV, they see, they go on the net and they watch soaps, and that seems to be the reality of many people. I'm not saying that's the only thing they do. It's that the socialization they go through can be damaging or good depending on who is doing it. So we want to have proper, as well as academic qualification. We want people to look at relationships, because I think they really matter, not even at home, in businesses, in life. People do better when they are able to relate in a better way to other people. And actually, when people become confident in who they are and what they do, then they do not need to put other people down. We find the biggest problem, violence or any kind of discrimination, comes from people feeling insecure and thinking putting other people down gives them some kind of power. So starting from back to mothers and fathers at home, how we bring up our boys matters a lot. If we tell them your sister doesn't matter, your sister will do the dishes while you are riding your bicycle, that is what they will learn. But if you tell your son, your sister and you are equal and you're going to take turns in doing the dishes, I know that's a very basic thing I'm giving as an example. That is the learning they are going to do. My sister is as valuable as well, not because she's not just a girl. She's a person, a human being. And we can keep building on that with schools as well. The whole issue, I know now is outlawed, but we all know, more, especially within African countries, there was huge preference of boys. A woman who didn't have a son was nothing. But things are changing. No society remains constant. So the changes are coming. We need to borrow the good ones from the past and build new ones, and that includes the education. I mentioned the school. The schools also need to play a part, not just dismissing. Oh, it's a black boy or the migrant boy or the refugee boy. They are expected to behave like that. I have heard teachers thinking that, well, a certain boy is behaving badly because he comes from a certain community. We can't have that. We need boys to grow up. They are different genetically, but they are equal to other people, to girls, and they'll grow into men who are responsible. It's about responsibility.
About responsibility, Professor. So I'm just looking at the time. It's about Professor. It's about responsibility and all of that. And there's still the fact that you mentioned about especially in the African context, there is still the fact that a boy child, the preference of a boy child is because the boy child can stay and perhaps if not become a responsibility of the family in the absence of the father. The woman or the girl is going to be married off by somebody else and move to another family and bear somebody else's name.
Yeah, but it goes to another family, contribute to the family as well. When they move to another, it's contributing to humanity. And that family will bring another daughter to their home anyway. So that value is added in all the way around. And also it's a myth to think that so many men contribute. The days of the hunter-gatherer are gone. Yeah. We know, for example, and I hate discussing this because it sounds we are back to men and women. How many times do you see men sitting under the table, under a tree, drinking beer in Africa, while women are toiling, picking coffee, picking cotton, fetching firewood, feeding the cattle? That is productive.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but the man will have to go hunting.
Women can hunt as well. So I think there's a very dangerous game where we pit men versus women, boys versus girls. It's a very seductive distraction. And the real issue, because relationships, you asked way back about relationships, in terms of roles and relationships. I think it's down to the couple or the family to decide the role, but whatever role you occupy, I don't know what or whatever, there has to be some form of mutual respect and accountability that doesn't harm the individual. So, for example, marriages are very different, so it's not necessarily the man is the head of the house, the woman is the follower. Yeah. In some households, the woman is the head of the house, the man is, kind of more the primary caregiver. That doesn't really matter per se, because, what we don't want to happen is for women to be heads of homes and then start beating their husbands. We absolutely are not advocating for that.
Absolutely not.
What your relationship looks like in your small circle, you decide, but at the core of it, we want mutual respect and safety so that people have no risk of vulnerability of being harmed. And I think you asked a good question about, are we at risk of almost isolating men
Yeah,
and
men.
women. And we have to be so careful, particularly in this society that loves to paint the picture that criminalizes our Black sons and like Black men. We have to be so careful that they don't run away with that narrative, okay? What we are saying here is because of the way historically and in today's times society has been governed, in certain circumstances, women come across like they have less rights than others.
Yeah, and that point is very important because many women don't report because they are protecting our sons and our husbands. They will not report violence because they know what will happen to a Black man when he's arrested for violence. And so to actually divide, to create that division is really unhealthy. And I imagine two teachers working in different schools, and you go back home, a wife and husband, and the husband sits down with a newspaper when the wife goes to the kitchen here. Okay, in different contexts, people may have people who cook for them. But do you think that is fair, George? I'm sure you don't agree, because both of you have worked long hours in it could be two doctors working in a hospital somewhere. They come home, but the little wife is supposed to cook and clean and do the laundry and take children and do the homework. Why? Is that really fair? Is that good for the family? For economic?
No, not at all. I don't think that's good. The other thing would be, Professor, would be someone thinking, what do you say to someone thinking, well, my wife doesn't allow me to cook?
Oh, if she's happy about that, we're not complaining. You know,
there's different ways to share roles. So some people are better cooks than others. You know, there's ways to share roles. It's not just cooking, cleaning. There's different things. You know.
Yeah. Or my wife thinks my cooking is rubbish. Actually, in my case.
And yeah, I have to be honest, some men, their cooking is rubbish, so I can understand why they wouldn't be the primary cooks. But there's other ways you can show support in a relationship that isn't necessarily cooking or cleaning. And certainly at the at the core, what we're talking about here, because let me be honest with you, there will be some women who are like, I absolutely want to be the caregiver at home. I want to be the homemaker. I want to be a housewife, and I feel empowered in that role. And to those women, I say absolutely good.
It's all right.
But in doing that role, she should be safe. She shouldn't be fearful, or because I'm the primary caregiver and picking up the kids and cooking and cleaning, then I am vulnerable to being attacked by my partner. So we're not, I can't speak for Professor Mukami,
I agree.
But she agrees with me. We are not necessarily advocating for specific gender roles, but we are advocating for equity, respect, and safety. Right, no matter where you occupy positions in relationships or society, that's the key thing. And one of the things we also wanted to be able to point out, because there are people who are hopefully listening to this who wanting to learn how to reach out, how to get support, how do I spot the signs? The signs might be visible. They may be, unfortunately, like a bruise, physical injury, or it might be somebody at work or somebody you know is a bit more withdrawn than usual. For us as clinicians, a sign that alerts us is if people keep coming back for the same thing, but there's nothing quite wrong we can find with them, so we are trained to routinely ask about any kind of risk of gender-based violence. It could be just noticing that somebody's a bit more withdrawn, that kind of thing. But so obviously as a resource, Laura has spoken about the kind of work Migrant Women's Press are doing, and we are partnering with them, and we look forward to showcasing and highlighting those stories that Migrant Women's Press have collated. We are a resource in Scotland, QISA, Women of African Descent in Scotland, if you look us up. But also there's other resources. Professor Mukami just shared one with me, Women's Support Project.
Yes, in Glasgow.
In Glasgow. We've got Shaki Women's Aid. You have Project Esperanza, which is based in Edinburgh. You have the Scottish Women's Rights Centre. Of course, Rape Crisis Scotland as well. Yeah. So there is support out there. And as somebody who is an ally of a woman who potentially has experienced violence, what you can do is be curious and ask sensitively, are you okay? A lot of us culturally are programmed to say, I'm fine. So another way to ask people, are you okay, is how are you eating? How are you sleeping? And who's holding you? And by who's holding you, we mean like who has your back at home, Just people saying fine is an automatic response. So think of other ways to show concern and interest for people when you think they might be experiencing violence of some form.
Yeah.
And listen. And also listening, because sometimes we ask people how they are, but we don't really hear the cry, the silent cry women make or men make when they're in pain. So we do need to, and this is where training is also very important in learning about how, because violence sometimes is so hidden and it looks sometimes it's so subtle, and sometimes people don't even want to complain because they think, oh, it's nothing, so, but having more active listening to what people are saying, you can pick the signs of it. But the most important is encouraging people to report. There is help out there. You are not alone. Sometimes we are no more than before. At least we have this organization which has been mentioned. So somewhere, and you do not necessarily have to follow what Kwisa says. If you come to us and you talk to us, we can refer you to somebody else if we are not able to give you the service you need. And if you don't like that particular service, we'll direct you to other people who have something maybe similar.
Maybe just about time to bring in Laura as well. And thank you, Professor. Laura, in migrant women press, do you find it easy to get the stories of perhaps survivors or victims of gender-based violence?
To get stories from victims, it's not easy. People are willing to talk more about their success stories, and
success stories will be what they've been able to achieve, or what if they've come out of something.
So it's like if you have gone through violence and have overcome it, so people are willing to really talk about those. But when approaching victims, it's hard to even recognize who is a victim. So it's harder to get such stories from a person who has experienced the violence themselves. There's still some stigma based around that, and some people who have experienced violence also feel scared to. And there's also shame, which is also like stopping them from coming out.
So they feel they feel a bit embarrassed about sharing that story. But would that also be the fact that is this affected by perhaps the stereotypes or the protective or protectionist attitude, which is they don't want to report a black man in the case of a black couple because they are likely to go to jail if they are arrested?
For most migrant women, they are scared of police, and they are scared of. They are just protective over their status here, and so while there's a lot of lack in systems, so they think about their housing, they think about their family setup, like how will they bring the children along. So I am not a professional to talk about this, but I'm just thinking on the people I have come across, and people are so scared to report because they feel like if action is taken against their partner, then it will affect all they are doing in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think we're just coming up to 2 minutes. Yeah, we've got 2 minutes to go. What would be your final thing to say, Laura?
So my final words is to say that we all need to work together against all forms of violence, and we also need to empower ourselves and our communities by ensuring that we spread out the word about and stigma around these things. So we support men as well as we support women by giving them information and signposting to the correct services, and also creating awareness around what services are available.
Thank you very much. And Professor, what will be your last word, and what do you aim to achieve in this 16 days of activism or action?
Yes, one thing I need to announce is on the 4th of December, we're having a Zoom and seminar with a panel to discuss this topic and to we can't solve everything this month, but it's actually, we keep benchmarking as we go along. So we really will send the information to you, George, so you can advertise for people to join the Zoom, because the more people are engaged and involved and asking questions, because we also have to ask questions to the government. It's not just about men, it's the policy makers also. We need to have dialogue with them, and this is an opportunity to raise our voices.
Dr. Isioma Okolo, what are your last words?
Yeah, so I believe we can end violence against women and gender-based violence in general in my lifetime. This is not a fight between men and women. This is a fight against injustice and inequality. And, for people who are impacted by this, please reach out to those community groups that we've referenced. We can be a really good resource for you, particularly if you are worried about being policed by the police or social care services or healthcare workers. Please use the community groups around you who can either refer you appropriately and also provide culturally safe advice and support. Okay.
Absolutely enjoyed that conversation. Absolutely enjoyed that conversation. Thank you very much for Dr. Isioma Okolo and of course Professor Mokami Macrom and Laura Naomi, who all joined us in this very special broadcast on gender-based violence and 16 days of activism. That's it for this special show. Thank you very much, Samson Daly, Bami Daly. Have a nice day.